Says we're like, hey, Jerome Powell, they just picked him to be the next Fed secretary. They left him in place. That's good news for the market. All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. It is the third quarter conference call. And to me, more importantly, a seminal event, as I said in the press release, about the future of the company. On the call today, Ken Cragen, our CFO. Ken, say hello.
Morning.
We have Will Horn, our CEO, and my business partner of many years. He's on the call. Will?
Good morning.
And we have Chris Wu, president of Ault Alliance. Chris has been a recent addition back in July. Super smart. Chris, say hello, my friend.
Good morning, everyone.
Here we go. So it is, what is today's date? The 22nd?
22nd.
It's the 22nd. We're going to cover the slides real quick, but first, we're going to have a forward-looking statement, a little pre-record, which we're pretty excited about. So let's, everyone's thrilled about this pre-record. Let's go.
This presentation contains forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995, including, but not limited to, statements about Ault Global Holdings Incorporated, sometimes referred to as AGH, expectations regarding the market demands, future financial performance, the implementation of strategic plans, and future growth. These statements are made based upon current expectations that are subject to known and unknown risks and uncertainties. AGH does not undertake to update forward-looking statements in this presentation to reflect actual results, changes in assumptions, or changes in other factors affecting such forward-looking information. Assumptions and other information that could cause results to differ from those set forth in the forward-looking information can be found in this presentation and in AGH's filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission, including its most recent periodic reports, including the risk factors listed in the Form 10-K for the year ended December 31, 2020, the 2020 annual report, as amended, available on our website and on the Securities and Exchange Commission's website, www.sec.gov.
Is that everything?
That's it.
All right, so how do I move this forward here?
Side arrow.
I tried it. It's not moving here. Let's see here. Little side arrow action. Okay. Obviously, we've covered this before, the sort of the leadership team, myself, Will Horn, Henry Innister, President General Counsel, Ken Cragen, who we introduced earlier, Chris Wu, who we introduced earlier, David Katzoff, Darren McGough, Douglas Gentz, Joe Spaziano, James Turner, and Gene Ho, our Chief Accounting Officer. I want to mention Jason Bartholomew. He is Director of Business Development for the company and really instrumental in the Bitmain relationship and helping us sort of expand that over the last probably half a year or so. So we're pretty happy about that. We're going to go through the third quarter highlights. This is sort of the process. We're going to go through the corporate structure, my commentary, and then we're going to get to the meaty stuff, which I think is the best news for the company in a long time. And we're going to try to focus in on some of the questions people have, the scale, the Ault Alliance structure, and the initiatives for 2022. Let's go to the third quarter highlights. This is the current corporate structure of the company. This is an important thing to look at now because this will be changing towards year end, and a fairly dramatic change into two separate companies, which we'll talk about later. You see Gresham, run by JR's team, JR and Tim Long, separate business. We really run them compartmentalized, CEO, own operations. Same with Turn On Green. They have a digital power unit there that's not listed, but is an important subsidiary. It's been there for 51 years. Then you see Ault Alliance. Now, we don't list every subsidiary here, but these are the main ones that are drivers. You can see our big position in Alzamend, AdTech Pharma, MTIX, which is the AVLP, the public company that is not reporting yet, but is an alternative reporter. This MTIX is still there. I know people question, but we're still committed to this process, and this is really something we really believe in. I know it's been a long time, but we tend to not give up on great ideas, and so we're working through that. Alt Alpha, which we consolidate, which is the hedge fund, Alliance Cloud Services, the data center, the crypto miners, which is really the story. We worked for a long time. Those of you who have been shareholders since 2016, 17 know we've tried at this before and had some trouble. We really feel like we've learned from that with our massive data center and the people that are involved. And Agree, which is run by Chris Wu, All Global Real Estate Equities, our commercial real estate division, we think it's going to contribute a lot of EBITDA. And one of the things we're going to point out in the future here is high growth, high margin, which we see at BitNile, and sort of steady as she go EBITDA generation, which kind of is what Chris specializes in. We'll talk about that going forward. For our 9 months ended, we had 44 million in revenue. This is a dramatic increase from last year. I mean, company is completely different. I think that for legacy shareholders, it's a little confusing because you have this very dramatic revenue growth. And one of the things you're experiencing is these mark-to-the-market transactions, which really skew our revenue. And we're going to cover that because in this quarter, in the fourth quarter, we've already said we own a big chunk of Mullen, which went public. And you can see on our books, we have it for 3.2 million, but that's obviously at today's prices created millions of dollars of gains, very similar to where Alzamend created millions of dollars of gains and then was marked to the market because it went down. This quarter, it's up. So it'll be a balancing act as the portfolio develops over the next year or so, where you'll see maybe a little bit more quarterly smoothness. But right now you see chaotic moves because of these large positions we have in other public companies that we mark to the market. Now that's the rules, by the way, folks. We follow the law, it's called GAAP, and Buffett talks a lot about this. You have to flow it through your income statement. There's nothing we can do about that. So it does create a ton of volatility in terms of revenue. The lender is obviously a big contributor, up almost 20 million for the year. The lender is a very big part of Go Forward for Alt Alliance. That is a very big part of the company and really part of our future plans. Revenue for trading activities, we talked about dramatic increase, a lot of volatility there. We have a gain of about 6.4 million on Alzamend, very misleading because we haven't sold any and we're waiting obviously for future events there. So this is really, we look at Alzamend as like a call option that doesn't expire on 2 drugs. We're pretty excited to own these 2 neurodegenerative treatments. Crypto revenue, dramatic increase, but I want to be clear, and I hope everyone can hear me very clearly on this. These are old machines. We did more in 1 month than we did all year with 1,000 of the new machines. So it's very misleading, and you're looking backwards when you see this. But we did start in March to turn on our old miners that we had in Indiana. They continue to contribute to the company, but really it's a go forward statement. And unlike some companies that buy miners way far out, our delivery starts now. We already got 1,000. We get 300 a month every single month. So you're going to see a dramatic escalation in the amount of Bitcoin mined. Obviously, that's subject to pricing in terms of how Bitcoin does. And of course, net income of 1.3 million versus a massive loss. In my opinion, I probably shouldn't use the word massive, but a dramatic loss before in that 9-month period. You see profitability, you see net income, a very big change for the company. And this is why we think it's time to split the company up. We'll explain that. This is a real earnings story, a real growth story, and you have really this sort of parabolic growth that's going to take place at BitNile, and we'll talk about that. Obviously, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but we've grown our assets to 225 million. Very volatile because we took a write down in terms of mark to the market for Alzamend, yet we're still there. You see a revenue growth 47% quarter over quarter. It's really a great story for me because we've been putting this together. Myself and the team have been sort of building this together, these little these blocks to make this possible, and now they're starting to pay itself off. But we admit that the current structure creates a lot of volatility for earnings. So we're gonna, Ken, do you want to comment at all about the third quarter before we move on to sort of this transformative the structure here? I wonder if you wanted to comment about the slide at all or anything you want to talk about in terms of earnings.
Yeah. So I think you touched on it. We really focused on the 9-month results because we did see big swings quarter to quarter from unrealized gains or losses. we have a big position in Alzamend, and we're big believers in Alzamend going forward. So we're happy to have that large position. But what happened in Q2 is they had gone public on NASDAQ. They had run up to almost $9. We had a big unrealized gain in Q2. And then the market kind of settled down and it ended Q3 at $3. So we had a big unrealized loss. But life today, as you pointed out, Todd, we're still up $6.5 million on our position in Alzamend. And so you gotta kind of look at the numbers and dive in one level deeper to see what's driving the fluctuations. And then on slide, yeah.
Ken, I was kind of hoping you could cover for everyone the best way to cover this is to give them a sense of the fact that the portfolio on the lender getting marked to the market. We see a pretty big mark to the market this quarter in Mullen. We've publicly disclosed. We filed the 13G.
Q4, you're talking about Q4.
Right, and I'm just trying to explain to them that they're going to see some positions up and down quarter over quarter. Maybe how that affects your thinking here.
Yeah, exactly. Because Todd is he's active in trading, and we've taken some nice positions. Mullen Technology was a good one. They listed on the NASDAQ. Their stock's up nicely, and we had that position prior to their uplisting. So we're up significantly on that position. There's some other trades that have been made on IPOs that have performed very well in Q4. We're not really here to give specific guidance on Q4, but we do have a few positions and a few trades that have worked out very well so far. Here we are, more than halfway through the quarter.
Yeah, I think it's important that we're not giving any guidance for Q4 at all. That's not the point. The point is to understand that we have a large portfolio there. Ken, do you remember the size of it as of right now? Is it approximately, I don't want to misspeak, but is it around 100 million or is it a little less than that right now?
Oh, no, we have a larger position than that on Mullen, and plus there's the warrants. So
no, but I mean in terms of the size of the overall portfolio of the lender.
Oh, 100 million. Right. Yeah, and when you think about the lender going forward, that's gonna, well, we're getting into the transition of where it is and kind of what assets and where. One thing in your quote on slide 8, Todd, is we do have to do a bit of a shout out to Gresham Worldwide, the defense business. During the third quarter, they were up 47% compared to last year. Yeah. Now they do have Gresham Worldwide that contributed to that, but they're starting to perform as we've allocated additional capital to JR and the team at Gresham Worldwide. They've been executing on the backlog, and their numbers are trending up nicely. So we get a little bit of a shout out to them.
I would say that if you look at the overall holding company structure, at any given time, one company or another may be doing better than the others. This has sort of been my philosophy for a long time. I know the market doesn't want to reward sort of the conglomerate model, and I'm aware of that. But for us, and for Will and I and the team, it gives us comfort to know that we have this sort of broad, diverse portfolio. This is the way we run things. And this is sort of why we're transitioning BitNow, because we kind of acknowledge that it's getting a little ridiculous on how they're valuing the whole company. Will, I thought maybe you could comment on the third quarter, what we've done year to date. Will, your thoughts at all? Give Will a second. He usually mutes everyone.
Yeah, no, look, I wouldn't even comment on the third quarter specifically, but just the 9-month ended. If you look at where we are today compared to where we were September of last year, it's night and day. Revenues have grown. We've solidified our balance sheet. We've eliminated virtually all of the debt at the company, right? And that's at the subsidiary level as well. I think we're reporting less than $2 million of total debt, of which half of it is in our subsidiary in Israel. So it's a strong balance sheet. We're not leveraged. We're not in a position that doing any more financing transactions are necessary in order to meet debt obligations. And I think we can all remember what that was back in 19 and really the early part of 2020. So it's allowed us this year to start focusing on really the initiatives that we've outlined. If you go back and look, I would say these started really in December of 2020 when we acquired the data center. It was a strategic acquisition, and it was nice because that was really what allowed us to enter into cryptocurrency to the extent that we wanted to, which was on a bigger scale, much bigger scale than we'd previously attempted back in 2018. So 2021 has been it's been fantastic for the company.
Yeah, I want to emphasize what Will just said. He said that we don't need to raise money to service debt, and that's really important because all of our future capital and the flexibility of future capital is based on the idea that our current operations don't need money to service that debt. The debt is actually inconsequential now at this point with a quarter, 225 million give or take balance sheet. The debt is literally less than 1% of the balance sheet. So we're very happy there where we don't have to deal with that. And obviously the lender contributes to cash flow along with our ramp up in mining for sure, although we have not sold a Bitcoin to date. Will, I wanted you to talk about a little bit about structure we have set up. We did file a shelf and we do have a lot of flexibility to go do preferreds and obviously take on debt. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on leverage and our ability to leverage given our free cash flow we think we're going to generate in 2022 and 23?
Sure. So again, historically, when we were doing financings, it was to service debt because we had a lot of subsidiaries, a lot of early stage businesses in some regards because they weren't generating positive cash flows. Now, as we transform the company, we're looking at entities that will be cash flow positive. BitNile is a perfect example of that. And as you have companies that are accretive and are generating cash flow, it puts you in a situation where you can go out and raise debt in order to expand the business significantly. So we are looking at that. It's something we're considering. We've not made any decisions at this point, though.
Appreciate that,
I think
Will.
there's an important thing. One of the things that Chris brings to the table is he's a guru in structuring these financing transactions so that they can stay within the entity that's being financed. I know we have some acquisitions teed up with very positive EBITDA that we can leverage and to have some self-contained debt within that target company. I know Chris is actively working on a couple of those.
Yeah, Chris brings a lot of financing power from Tenejo and his background at Karl Marx, and really the ability for us to do non-recourse financing at the subsidiary level, and that's a really important factor here. Also, Chris has been working with the team to allow us, when we expand our miners, to be able to borrow money from an equipment financing perspective too, and this is a really important component of how you look at the company going forward, because we have a lot of levers to pull in terms of equity versus debt versus equipment financing, et cetera. So really kind of a maturity that's happening to a holding company, and now that separation is going to sort of take it to the next level. Let's go through the transition real quickly here. Will, what do you think? Will, do you want to add anything to this slide before I get started? This is sort of the new path of what we think things look like going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a logical outcome. If you look back and if you look at what really I think we've signaled to the market over the last 10, 11 months, and that is BitNile is going to become a significant standalone entity. If you look at the recent purchases that we've announced of miners, we're talking close to $200 million in the aggregate for the miners. So having that significant of a balance sheet, and then of course the resulting revenues that will be derivative of that, it makes sense to position this as a standalone company and move forward with that. And again, it's very distinct and different from Ault Alliance, which, as Todd will point out, is the holding company structure where you've got multiple companies that are basically maturing until they're in a situation like BitNile where they can be ultimately spun out.
Hey, Chris, I wondered if you had any commentary here about the new structure. I know you're a pretty big component of it and a big fan of it, and maybe you could touch on DeFi a little bit.
Well, I'm pretty excited about the transformation just because across all of our platforms, we really have an opportunity to optimize the assets so that various investor bases can take advantage of them. And as we discussed earlier, our strategies to help grow BitNile will be very significant, especially in expanding blockchain technology, which we believe is very transformative and one of the most important innovations of our time. And therefore, we are evaluating the development of and investments in a variety of blockchain technologies, of which decentralized finance is critical, DeFi for short. So we believe that DeFi will also be quite additive strategically to BitNile as a miner, which will be an essential pillar in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So pretty interested to expand beyond just mining as well.
So I ask everyone on the call to look at this chart, understand this is really an earnings power story, but two different kinds of earnings power. You see the earnings power of the data center and our mining capabilities. And this really changes the narrative because we are at, I think, about 18 million a year now. And as we put 300 new miners on a month and then go into March, we'll be putting 2,300 miners a month in. This is not a long-term vision. This is happening right now in real time. We've already had delivery of 1,000 and then 300 and then 300 every month for 10 months, starting in March, 2,000 a month for 6 months. And then in August, we ramp up with those green miners, which is the relationship with Bitmain. And I can't stress enough to you that direct relationship with Bitmain has sort of changed the narrative. But on the other side, Ault Alliance, you see an earnings and EBITDA story, especially with the lender, with Agree, the real estate business. Turn on Green obviously is a high growth business that hasn't kicked in yet. And we still anticipate, and I've been planning that would eventually float or do some sort of public transaction, either with a SPAC or an IPO. All things are on the table there. We're not confirming anything there, but we know that Gresham and Turn on Green are looking to do their own public transactions. So a lot of opportunity for future shareholders. And if you're a shareholder of BitNile Holdings, the old DPW, Alt Global, when it changes names, you'll wake up with Ault Alliance in your portfolio someday. So it's important to understand you're going to own two public companies. Here's the scalability of the mining business and what I talked about in terms of delivery, the 16,000 miners and the 4,600 miners. I do want to bring it to everyone's attention that we did buy an additional 600 miners. We did disclose that in our 8K, but we haven't issued a press release with it because it's now, if you think about it, not as consequential to the size of the miners we have and the scale we have. Ken, can you talk about this chart here, the hash rate? I'm very proud of the fact that this hash rate is a certain percentage of all Bitcoin mined depending on total hash rate. So Ken, any thoughts here?
Yeah. This is what's exciting when we think about BitNile in the fairly near term being a standalone public company, because it would be a pure play crypto miner with data centers and some DeFi initiatives. As we install these 2,600 miners, there's 4,600 of them are at a higher hash rate, 140 terahash, and it brings the total company to 2.2 exahash, and at $60,000 to $65,000 per Bitcoin, where we've been over the last few weeks, we get to 300 million in revenue. Think about our year-to-date revenue through 9 months of 44 million this quarter, and then we'll exit 2022. As we ramp up to these 20,600 miners, we'll be at a run rate of probably 300 million depending on market, right? You always kind of have to put an asterisk on these forecasts that depends on where the market is, difficulty level, and U.S. dollar price of Bitcoin. But it's very exciting. It pencils out great in Excel, as you can see on that table. But what was exciting is when we put in the first 1,000 miners in Michigan last month, they're performing just as we scheduled out in our model. So it's good to see, when the rubber's hitting the road, that the revenue and the margin are penciling out as we projected. So now it's just a matter of getting in the new machines, racking them up. Crypto Joe, who's on our team, has done a great job with that. He's been working very hard. Seeing the data center, it's beautiful, it's clean, there's a lot of space, and so we're ramping up the power capacity there, and so we're definitely very excited about this.
I would say Crypto Joe, Darren, the team, Randy, the people, Caesar, others that have joined us in Michigan to help build that out as we develop that team. Brian there in Michigan, that data center is really incredible. I've done some live video there. It's really the forefront of what's going to happen with BitNile going forward, the relationship with Bitmain and that data center. I do want to bring everyone's attention to assuming Bitcoin of 30 to 40,000 in current difficulty levels will still mine 139 to 185 million at a depressed price. So we were not foolish enough to underwrite this with like the perfect weather, as it so to speak. We're not out there saying, hey, we got $100,000 Bitcoin. And if you look at the chip shortage and understand the difficulty scale, there are still S9s producing today, 5-6 years later. And so we're upgrading sort of the top of the mining pool, so the best miners in the world with the 140 terahash. So you can see we're investing, we're here to win it, we're in it to win it, we're investing to be there. Will, any commentary on what we're doing in mining? I know that your mathematical brain has been at work here.
I think Ken has done a good job explaining it. It's exciting. If you go back and again, we're looking at history here, but in 2018, we wanted to get to 10,000 miners. And, you brought up the S9s. Obviously, that was our original entry into cryptocurrency mining. Things have changed. It's transformed. We have a data center. We're able to control the operations, 100%. We've got a good handle on our electricity cost, our power cost, which obviously is the primary driver in your overall profitability. And the new miners are so much more efficient than where the S9s were. It's really changed the entire dynamics of that industry. So I couldn't be more excited, and that's why I think now is the right time to put in place this transformation of the company.
Hey, one thing to know that we do publish on the BitNile website every 2 weeks, number of miners installed and Bitcoin mined, and we will be committing to once a month putting out a press release of total Bitcoin mined. This is important to us. We want to be transparent. We want to sort of show the shareholders that we're very committed to this process. And like I said earlier, if you look at what we mined in all 9 months, we're doing more than that, a lot more than that on a monthly basis and growing. So you would be expecting that.
And it's important to understand that, Todd, that when we started putting in the S19s, those effectively went in at the very tail end of September, and then of course completed that initial installation in October. So these assets have just been put in service.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and that is we get a lot of people questioning things, but you got to look at timing from the time we restructured the balance sheet, completed the $200 million of raise. And by the way, thanks to all the shareholders that were supportive during the ATM process. We raised a lot of money, really transformed the company. And this is why we're trying to reward shareholders with sort of this pure play. It is a pure play in mining, DeFi, and data. And we want to be a player here. And one of the things we're looking at going forward, you see a number and say, wow, what if they generated 200 million, 300 million? What are they going to do with that money? Obviously, a lot of flexibility there. With no debt, we're obviously going to pay down any financings we do to continue to buy more miners and expand. But you also see an opportunity for us to continue to invest in the hash rate. And that's why you're going to see us pretty much continually go out there and look for additional miners as we start to generate cash with that relationship with Bitmain. You can see that in our commitment to the 4,600 new XP, the green miners with the carbon credit. Really a fascinating transaction we did in Dubai. Going on to Ault Alliance, we don't list every subsidiary here, and I want to bring in Chris for the conversation about potential acquisitions. Now, Chris, obviously, these transactions are not done. We're contemplating them. But could you talk in general about the kind of transactions you look like? I want everyone to shift their focus from high growth, sort of parabolic revenue growth, which is where we'll be looking at BitNow, to sort of a steady as she goes EBITDA model. Chris, your thoughts?
Sure, Todd. Well, I think that's one of the opportunities that we've been actively focused on since I joined the company in July. And we are, very actively pursuing companies that are stable insofar as, recurring revenue with, appropriate EBITDA margins. And so what we're hoping to do strategically is across our platforms, obviously unlock the value at BitNow, but also from an Ault Alliance perspective, provide shareholders with opportunities that they will be able to see. I don't want to say conventional, but more mature companies going through a secular phase in their growth, and therefore an appropriate juncture requiring capital from Ault Alliance to reposition them. But at the same time, they're already mature from a development standpoint, and therefore, what we're guiding towards more longer term is to provide revenue and EBITDA that's of a quantum that's meaningful. And I also believe that applies to Agree, where, obviously that's a new entity with no assets at the moment, but we don't expect that to be the case in the subsequent quarters moving forward. And again, what we're looking for in terms of Agree is commercial real estate with the types of net operating income that people would understand from a real estate perspective.
I'm going to go on to the next slide. Let's talk about the reorganization. Based on what we're doing now, the company will change its name before the end of the year. We already secured the symbol, NILE, N-I-L-E. That'll be the new DPW symbol. The new name will be BitNile Holdings, which will effectively own the data center, the mining operation, and any DeFi initiatives we have. Some things that we're contemplating for 2022, based on the reorganization, we're looking at special dividends. We really wanted to look at the possibility of being a company that issued Bitcoin as a dividend to our shareholders. This is a complicated thing because you have to have a wallet. You have to be able to make it available through DTC so it goes in your brokerage account. Not a simple thing. We're working on that. Obviously, you could always pay a cash dividend. And if you see that big kind of generation that we think we're going to have in 22 and 23 and beyond on the BitNile side, these are contemplated transactions. For the future, BitNile will continue to mine operations, strategic procurement of geographical locations in terms of mining power as we expand out of Michigan. We'll be looking at other data centers to expand. We want to be at the sort of the top of the food chain. That means being in the top 10% out there. And then, of course, as we said earlier, for initiatives, we're going to be looking at future acquisitions on the Ault Alliance side. So what's going to happen in December, you're going to wake up with a new symbol and a new name. And then really what you're going to hear going forward is pretty much DeFi, Bitcoin data. And you're going to have this subsidiary waiting in the wings to be a special dividend, obviously, for shareholders. You could do the math. If everyone does the math, it could be a large special dividend, but we'll see what happens. Will, any comments on the initiatives for 2022?
Will, you're muted.
I think we lost one.
Yeah, I apologize.
No problem.
No, I'm here. No, so 2022 is real simple. It's a continuation of 2021 to the extent that we're talking about execution, right? Putting capital to work and advancing the operations of our subsidiaries. BitNile obviously is a significant entity from the standpoint of cash requirements and capital expenditures and investment. And the other companies, it's much more modest.
All right, Ken, any comments on the slide of the sort of initiatives for 2022?
Yeah, it's important to understand that that we need to. This will be at a point where we have that capital available for dividends. Historically, if we have capital, we're investing it back in the business. But you saw the numbers on the previous slide. If we're doing 300 million in revenue at 90% margin, that's a lot of capital available. And you would think we'd be carving out some of that to reward back to our shareholders. So and of course leave it to Todd to want to do something cutting edge like paying a dividend in crypto. But so we'll get that figured out.
Hey, if we can, we can. We'll see what happens there. Well, obviously, the disclaimer on the bottom, you see subject to Delaware law and profitability of Bitcoin mining and approval from the board. But this is something that I'm pretty fond of. The idea, it's cutting edge. I know it's not been done. We're looking at it pretty hard. But we're pretty excited about what we built, and there we go, right? Sort of wrapping up the summary for the future, the name change, symbol change to Nile. Restructuring the two subsidiaries. Obviously, BitNile will control Alliance Cloud Services and the mining operation. Alt Alliance will control Gresham, Turn On Green, Digital Power, and Agree, and the other subsidiaries. There's quite many of them, some of them smaller in size, not really relevant today. The possibility of a special Bitcoin dividend, we're going to look at that. Bi-weekly updates on what we're mining. So very transparent on the mining side. Update on potential DeFi investments, which we're looking at pretty intensely, and then update on future and corporate developments. So look for the name change in December, and then look for that special dividend sometime in 2022. As sort of we wrap this up, Chris, any parting thoughts?
You're on mute, Chris.
Not really. I think you summed it up, Todd. This is a seminal time, as you've already stated in your press release, and we believe this unlocks value for shareholders.
Hey, we appreciate that, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us, obviously. Will, any parting thoughts?
Look, I think 2021 has been a success to date. I think we've done a fantastic job raising capital. I know we announced the completion of the $200 million ATM. If you look at our average costs that we were selling securities under that equity financing, it was significantly above where the company is trading at today. So,
At 381 average. 381 average. Great.
Yeah,
great
it's,
average.
We were able to bring in money on a very, very favorable term. And again, this is something that we've struggled to do historically. So that and the prospects, future prospects of the company with the existing businesses, it's fantastic right now.
Yeah, I can say the same thing. Ken, any parting thoughts before we hang up here?
Yeah. Looking out a year from now, this is going to be, well, as you mentioned, Todd, looking back a year compared to today, it's night and day. But from where we are today, which we're very happy about, and looking ahead 12 months, it's going to be even a more dramatic improvement with the ramping up of mining and the key acquisitions that Chris is looking at. Alt Alliance could be at 200 million of revenue and significant EBITDA, and then we've seen that BitNile has that 200-300 million run rate potential. So it's really really exciting times for us.
So let me give you a summary. Thank you, Ken, so much. Thanks, everybody. Let me give you a little quick of a summary as we exit here. A couple things to think about, and that is you got two vehicles now, BitNile, Alt Alliance, one EBITDA cash flow story, but still significant revenue growth, as Ken said. You have a really sort of parabolic revenue growth around one of the most transformative technologies around, and that's blockchain with BitNile. And what we decided to do is really reward people now. We could have went down the path of trying to spin out BitNile and IPO, but we wanted to demonstrate to shareholders, because we know it's taken some time with Turn on Green and Gresham, and those haven't got public yet. We wanted to make sure we could, really cut the umbilical cord and make this happen for shareholders now. And that's why we took the initiative of making the parent BitNile Holdings and really changing the narrative. And as a shareholder, you're going to have a choice going forward. Do you hold on to the parabolic growth that is, we think, BitNile, or do you keep both and have Ault Alliance in your portfolio? We really encourage you to think of Ault Alliance as a value player with a future generation of businesses it owns, buying undervalued assets. Chris and myself and Will and the team finding things that we think are undervalued, sort of the future BitNiles of the world, but really steady, more earnings, relative earnings, more EBITDA focused than you see this sort of DeFi disruptive point at BitNile. So look for the name change, the symbol change. We appreciate everybody. We do know there's a lot of volatility in the quarterly earnings, and obviously we're going to expect that. You can see that with things like Mullen and other IPOs that we participated in the quarter. Appreciate the whole team sticking with us. Special thanks to all the shareholders that have been so loyal and stuck with us through that ATM. We'll see what the future brings. We'll see you at year end and going into the new year. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Thanks for being on the call.
Thanks, everybody.